the Service Design Network New York chapter. We host monthly events, sometimes 2 events in a month. So get really excited. We do have 2 events this month. But just to make sure you know where you are, this is a fellowship panel. We're talking about shifting from practitioner-centered toward community-led. And we have the NYC Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity Service Design Studio here with some fellows to talk about their work. We're super excited and honored to have them. This is one of the many celebrations for Service Design Day. I'll get into that in a little bit. But again, we're the Service Design Network New York chapter, and we host events. We facilitate knowledge exchange. We're part of 47 other chapters that are part of this global organization that talks about service design. Happy to go on and define service design. We could have a whole talk about that, but that's our community. We share content. There's a global event that's hosted. There are a lot of articles and knowledge and things shared, and it's really about meeting other folks to talk about service design and service design related things. And this group particularly involves individuals from the New York City area. But since the pandemic, we've been welcoming people from any time zone that is complementary to where we're hosting at 6 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday. So again, we have our events typically the second Tuesday of every month. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Meetup to learn more about those. Also to see recaps. We have one of our writers here, Alyssa. So super excited to have her here. And what else to say? Kathleen, do you want to talk about our next event, our bonus event in a couple weeks?
Yeah, so just real quick, we typically, like what Natalie said, we make on the second Tuesday of the month, but this month we have a bonus event, yay. And it's gonna be at lunchtime, an hour long, so grab your lunch, and it will be a talk by Agnes Quick. She used to be the design ambassador serving Singapore, and she had more than 2 decades of experience working in public services. So really exciting to have her, and it will be a lot of fun to just have Q&A session and get to know her and learn a little bit more about service design in the government in other parts of the world. So with that, yeah, Natalie, I'll pass it back to you for more housekeeping.
Our favorite time. We have these one-on-one chats that we're offering between myself, Kathleen, Antonio, and Tim Reitz actually just added his Calendly to our discussion board through Meetup. And so you can sign up to chat one-on-one with any one of us if you want to talk about anything related to service design, New York City, I don't know, the beach, yoga, I don't know. But feel free to set up time with us in 30-minute slots. We also are doing spotlights on Instagram to feature our community members. So anyone who's been attending events, who has been volunteering, we would love to share your profile on our Instagram and help people really see one another during this time. We hope that we can eventually get back into our events where we remember 60 to sometimes up to 100 people could get together, but we want to be safe. And so we're trying to find other ways that people can really connect and see one another during this time. So please, we have the form somewhere. I don't know if Kathleen's able to find it, but if we can share that with you, but we would love to get some more spotlights. We have a website, sdnnyc.com, for past event content if you're looking for that. I also have a YouTube channel if you'd like to follow and see all of our past event recordings. Please rate us if you can. At the end of this, we do look at the ratings and look at what people are most excited about learning. So take a look. And Service Design Day, this is a global event. The official day was on June 1st, but there are events really from June 1st onward to continue to celebrate bringing people together from different backgrounds, different disciplines, talking about community development, talking about raising awareness about service design, how it can have an impact in your location from anywhere in the world. So that's Service Design Day. You can learn more about that through the Service Design Network. But without further ado, I'll pause on this slide so you can take a look at all our wonderful speakers for today. They will be doing introductions with themselves. I'll hand over the microphone to them to share, but just super excited to have the Service Design Studio from the Mayor's Office and Economic Opportunities. And yeah, they're gonna get into that. So I guess I'll pass it over to Ashley to take it from here, and then we can do your all introductions and however you'd like to share. So I will stop.
For sure. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Mari's going to be kicking us off. I'm going to be kind of doing a high level intro, but we'll all introduce ourselves as we kind of talk and take the limelight in this talk. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Thanks, Ashley.
All right. And everyone's going to take a breath. And we're going to get started. Go ahead, Mar.
Thanks, Ashley, and thanks. I really did need that breath today in this humid, rainy, crazy Tuesday. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Natalie and Kathleen and the Service Design Network. Thank you for having us. And also just happy Service Design Day, or I guess maybe even Service Design Month to everybody. Before I get started, I was wondering if folks wouldn't mind dropping in, if you'd like your name, where you're from. We'd also just be really interested to understand who's in the room today. So if you want to drop in where you work or what kind of practitioner you are or why you're interested in here, we'd love to see that. So go ahead and do that if you like. And also just, we're just wanting to say that we're really grateful to be here today. Go to the next slide, Ashley, please. So I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mari Nakano. I go by she, her. I'm the design director of the Service Design Studio at the New York City Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity. I'm here today with our program team, Ashley Cortez, Sophanie Joseph, Kyla Massey, who will introduce themselves later on during this presentation. And we're also really super excited to have two of our fellows join us today, Marquis Jenkins and Arabia Simeon. So thank you two for taking the time out of your very busy days to be here to share about your work and your perspectives. Today, we're going to talk about Design by Community, which is our fellowship and funding program that aims to support leaders and organizers in poverty-impacted communities to design and develop hyper-localized solutions that tackle problems that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Through the lens of this fellowship, we're also going to spend some time sharing how we're learning and understanding what it really means to shift from a design with communities perspective to actually more of a designed by kind of community model. And as civic service designers, we're all really exploring what that means in terms of our own positioning as facilitators and enablers. We've been co-designing this inaugural program in partnership with Take Root Justice, which provides legal participatory research and policy support to strengthen the work of grassroots and community-based groups in New York City to dismantle racial, economic, and social oppression. And I want to also note that the fellows for this inaugural cohort are unique in that they are all community leaders from our NYC Housing Authority or NYCHA residents and tenant organizers, and we'll go into more detail about that in our presentation. Next slide. So before we jump into the fellowship, we wanted to give you some context about the Service Design Studio, which is a team that's part of the Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity. So our office's mission is to reduce poverty and increase equity through evidence-based programming, service delivery, and innovative practices in design, data, product development, technology, program investment, and research. And shout out to Kim Peng, who might be out there. I think I saw you join on the list, and to anyone else here joining from our office. I'm so glad to have you here. New York City is comprised of 8.6 million residents, and over half are in or near poverty, according to the annual New York City Government Poverty Measure Report, which our office puts out every year. The city is comprised of 300,000 public servants and working across over 125 different agencies. You see this little tiny dot here if you go to the next slide. So our service design team is charged with providing, we're a tiny team of like 2 to 4, sometimes a little bit more, but right now we're pretty tiny. But we're charged with providing community-centered service design support and solutions to city staff, and now in this case directly to communities via the guidance and support of community organizations like Take Root Justice. Next slide. So our team focuses on building the capacity of government colleagues to understand and apply service design tools and tactics. We offer custom designed resources, convene city staff, and offer training, workshops, and one-on-one consultations for free for city staff across agencies and offices. And we also do the work and engage with partnering agencies on improving programs, services, and products focused on providing resources and benefits to low-income New Yorkers. The Design by Community Fellowship is something that attempts to modify and enhance these overarching focuses and investigates how we push and can push the capabilities of service design to be a stronger vehicle for more direct change. Next slide. So our studio's approach is something that we're always evolving and always iterating on, as in the spirit of service design or just design. We are actively practicing a community-centered service design process, which includes principles that we've been learning from practitioners in the field versed in equity, community, and liberatory design practices, such as Antoinette Carroll and Hilary Sedovic over at Creative Reaction Lab, Sloan Leo and Flux Studios work, blackspace.org, and the Design Justice Network. And these are just a few examples of people and collectives that we're really learning from these days. Some of those principles that we've been uplifting, are things like focusing on healing and building trusting relationships in our work, or putting equity and accessibility at the forefront, acknowledging systems of oppression openly and transparently, and being advocate for centering people's needs first. We talk about building on existing resources and building off what's working, and really think about being more collaborative and inviting diverse co-creators to the table, and also just really aiming to create a learning culture. Through the Design by Community Fellowship, we are learning where or how design can serve as a tool or tactic to advance fellows' goals, and also where there's still gaps. Next slide. So you can stay there. So I really want to spend a little time breaking down how we're seeing our basic understanding of service design layered on with a community-led lens within this context of government. So a lot of you may be just super familiar with all this stuff, but give us a moment, and we just want to kind of layer on from the base, and up. So the basics, right? So we really like Lou Downs' definition of a service as defined in their book, Good Services. So in simple, a service is something that helps someone do something. And a good service is one that actually helps you get that something done with as much ease as possible. So, and by ease, I mean things like something that's faster, something that feels like you're being treated respectfully when you're going through that service, something that gives you no confusion with engaging with it. Service design, so that is the activity of organizing all the parts of that service, the people, the processes, tools, requirements, communications, etc., in a way that can make that service easier and better to use. Next slide. So often as service designers in government, and probably in many other sectors too, we find ourselves practicing and applying some level of service design in settings where we're confronted with top-down structures like this, where solutions are administered and dictated by those often furthest away from the community. Next slide. And so when we think of top-down structures, they're usually structures where decisions are made from the top down, people are risk averse and try to avoid making mistakes, that there's only one way type of attitude, a structure that's not rooted in empathy, meaning it's not structured in a way that truly allows for communities to input their needs and perspectives. And it's often focused on quantity, the more is better type of approach, as opposed to quality and satisfaction, and overall isn't really flexible. Next slide. But the service design model does not thrive well in this current top-down environment. So we really need to squash that top-down triangle model and think about how to transform it into a circular one that intentionally centers community voice through the entire system and its processes. And so for those of you in this practice, you know that this is no easy feat. Much easier said than done. Next slide. Thanks. So we think of it as part of our responsibility to shift the system, and our job is to demonstrate more boldly how we relate to, engage with, and build trust with communities, as well as acknowledge the harm we've caused. We also need to better commit our energy towards undoing poorly designed social service systems. Most of the time, we as designers are looking for ways to transform that top-down, upside-down, literally and figuratively, that structure into a more community-centered one, just so that we can actually get to work and be effective and make real and visible change in our communities. So we're saying through this fellowship program that we can do that, and the point we're trying to make is that change can happen, and when we design directly alongside our communities in concerted ways, that can happen. And of course, this isn't the only way, but we see this as a part of the larger equation with regards to how service design contributes to systemic transformation. Unlike a top-down structure or process, we see our service design process as one that allows us to take chances and risks. It doesn't ask you to be a perfectionist, rather it's a process that allows for trial and error so we can learn from our mistakes and failures and make something better. It focuses on quality and community satisfaction. It centers and involves community throughout the process. It leverages imagination, experimentation, and tinkering, and it's a process that values empathy, people's experiences, and stories. But that really only touches the tip of the iceberg. Next slide. In addition to this, we've been layering on additional principles that are adopted from the practice of what is termed community design. Community design is the application of social justice values to design and design thinking. It focuses on, listens to, and applies the feedback of communities very genuinely. It tackles the problem in multiple ways and not just one single way. It's generated by grassroots or bottom-up processes, and it empowers and enables communities. Next slide. So when we talk about centering communities, we don't just mean being able to talk to people so that we can incorporate their feedback into the things we make. What we're trying to do is shift power more to communities in the decision-making process with the goal that perhaps we can actually build services by and with the people. But in order to do that, it's important for us to stand behind and employ these principles you see here. We know there are more principles to consider in the design and justice space, and we're here to learn and evolve and iterate openly about our practice and ourselves and our positionality as practitioners. Next slide. And you know, in all of this, we recognize that community design is a term and a way of designing for justice that emerged during the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s, and probably even before that too. So we see service design as a practice that is or should be historically rooted in community and community building. And we learn each day from our fellows what that looks like, from the types of designers and other partners who should be at the table, to what tools or tactics from the design world that can be leveraged and evolved to elevate community endeavors. I know I talked a lot, but I hope this really gave you a bit of context that's helpful to kind of really set up our talk today. So feel free to drop questions in the chat or any type of comments. And in the meantime, I'll hand it off to Ashley to talk about the actual program. Thank you.
All right. Hi, sorry, I couldn't find, we have a lot of, presentations going on, so I couldn't find this one. It took me a little bit to find the windows. Now I got to find everything again, but that's okay. I'm off mute now. So my name is Ashley Cortez, she, they. I work with the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity, and I'm leading this program right now. And yes, Jamila, exactly. The Black Panther Party was also a good example of this, right? In the Bronx, this community hospital was created that did trauma-based acupuncture in the ears that was taken over by the Black Panthers and provided acupuncture to community that helped with their trauma. And they saw how this kind of went through their community, improve their community. Yes, free programs. Yes, breakfast and meals, right? Because this is all examples of different community groups rising up and giving these shared resources to their community. So definitely Jamila is also one of our fellows. So if you want to DM her at any point, please go ahead and do that. Sorry that we couldn't hear from her today, but hoping that with talking with Arabia and Marquis, that you'll get a little taste of our fellows and the programs that we're providing. Another thing to talk about this slide very quick, this reminds me of, there's a Netflix documentary out there right now called Crip Camp. And I would really, really recommend anyone who is interested in how to build programs within dignity and with people. They did an excellent job of doing that. So Crip Camp, it's on Netflix. It's a documentary. I would definitely recommend it. So now let's talk about design cut by community. So in its original context prior to the pandemic, we had already actually released a fellowship. We were supposed to start I think around March 16th or so, right around the pandemic. And so we really had thought for many months about like how we were going to bring in 2 Design by Community fellows into our office space. So in its original context prior to the pandemic, we would place fellows with living experience that aligned with a scoped government project. So if, for example, if the service design studio had a childcare project coming down the pipeline, we'd want to match fellows with who have close experience with and want to improve the experience of how low-income families are seeking and accessing childcare. We would pay them a living wage. We would have them co-lead the service design process with our service design designers, and then they would lead this project with us for about a year. So, you know, lots of things happened between, I skipped a slide. Here we go. Here's the program timeline. So, and we worked really hard on that previous model, the one leading up to the pandemic. We were awarded funds in late October of 2019. And from November 2019 to March 2020, we developed that program. We did our own service design process where we looked at a lot of fellowships we really admired, and we talked to them. We understood what worked for them, what maybe did not work for them, and we modeled our program after that. We launched the program and started accepting applications March 12th. Then COVID restrictions went into place March 16th. You know, this was really jarring for us. We had worked really hard on this fellowship, and at first we sort of just froze. We weren't sure how long the pandemic would be in place. We weren't sure how long these restrictions would last. And we didn't know how it would impact our day-to-day as an office. And so we waited about a week before really realizing that the current model was not going to be able to be sustained during the pandemic. And so we had to really pivot this. We had to understand why we had to move away from this approach to the one that we have now. And that was, we had a real lack of understanding of the projects coming down the pipeline. Everything went out the window, and we couldn't be sure that we would be able to match fellows to their areas of focus. And that felt more extractive than additive. And for us, centering and prioritizing a fellow's needs and goals was our priority. We understood that working remotely would have a lot of requirements for fellows to work at a fast pace. And given how hard COVID-19 hit New York City and the influx of rapid response requests our team was handling, we weren't really sure we would be able to fully support the fellows as mentors. And most notably, we wanted to get money out into the community in order to address that community-driven need. You know, in June, the Black Lives Matter protests were reclaiming the streets in New York City, and mutual aid groups were springing into action to help their community. And we wanted to respond to the criticisms we were hearing and the demand we were seeing in communities to have control of their own recovery. And so our office, being nested within the Mayor's Office of Operations, had a lot of immediate response work to do, from building a food system to deliver to residents in need, to calling doctors from across the country to come in and support the exhausted hospital staff we had in New York City, to building beds and hotels for folks who had to stay away from their loved ones during this time. We had a lot of operational things to work on. And so we finally got back to thinking about how we might pivot this fellowship in June and began looking for a community partner. We then began to co-design the program with our community-based partner in the fall and winter of 2020. And we're proud to say that we once again launched this program in January 22nd with an open application to community leaders. And so in this iteration, we really pivoted from in-house designers to community-led design projects. During this time, we shifted a lot of our thinking about how to better build capacity and do the work on the projects that were hyper-local. Instead of fellows working on predefined government projects, we had potential fellows submit their own projects in an expression of interest form that aimed to support their community. And instead of paying 2, maybe 3 full-time fellows, we shifted the money to be an ample funding package for 5 projects that would see their projects to life, a living and learning stipend for spending the time training with us, and research incentive money to go out and speak and test with their community. And instead of co-leading with our in-house designers, we would have fellowship teams lead all parts of their project with the support of the program team. And we would shorten the timeline to 6 months from launch of their first iteration, knowing we're not going to be encumbered by government timelines and other deliverables that can slow down projects. And so this is sort of our new model, in our new model timeline. Last month, we began working with fellows to frame their design challenge, do landscape and secondary research, help them write a design brief, and build stakeholder lists. And now we're gearing up to start working on one-on-one interview guides where fellows will go out and develop their research plan, their interview guides, and go out and speak to community. In July, we'll work with fellows to rapidly prototype and iterate on their ideas or connect those dots. And then in August, we'll work on rolling those projects out. And I'll pass it off to Sophanie, who can tell us more about Take Root Justice, who is our partner in this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophanie Joseph. I'm a community planner and advocacy coordinator in the Equitable Neighborhoods practice area of Take Root Justice. Take Root works with grassroots groups, neighborhood organizations, and community coalitions to help make sure that people of color, immigrants, and other low-income residents who built our city are not pushed out in the name of progress. We work together with our partners and clients to ensure that residents in historically under-resourced areas have stable housing they can afford, places where they can connect and organize, and jobs to make a good living. And so these opportunities that allow people to thrive. We do this because the people who live and work in New York City must have a voice in the future of their neighborhoods. Next slide is the working alongside. Oh, sorry, previous slide. So we do this by working alongside our local leaders to serve NYCHA-based communities. And so what that means is looking at place-based specific services within a developed community. So NYCHA was created in 1934 to help alleviate the housing crisis caused by the Great Depression during Mayor LaGuardia's administration. And it was the first agency in the US to provide publicly funded housing. Today, more than 400,000 New Yorkers live in a NYCHA building. But there are ongoing struggles with providing full services to residents. So therefore, residents and tenant organizers alike, they're pursuing a number of different tactics to address their housing justice needs. And so Design by Community is one of these tactics that I'm excited to be a part of. Next slide.
Sorry. All right. So the Design by Community Fellowship in its current iteration helps us do really two things. And that is it helps us increase our capacity by bringing on one community-based organization and 13 fellows to learn service design. And we're doing the work by helping those fellows bring 5 locally informed and scoped design projects into their community. Kyla, who's our program coordinator and program designer, is going to introduce themselves and introduce the 5 projects that are being supported through this fellowship.
Hey y'all, I'm Kyla. My name is Kyla Massey. My pronouns are she, they, and I've had the privilege of joining the Design by Community Fellowship as, like Ashley was saying, designer and coordinator. And what that's meant so far in my work has been that I've had the opportunity to engage with, hear the wins and challenges of, and been able to cheer on each and every one of our fellows as they move through this program with us. And we have quite an impressive grouping of community leaders that have come together to create opportunities, programs, and systems that in some way help to better the lives of their community members and the city at large. And so I will announce and introduce the 2021 Design by Community Fellowship Cohort 1. So what we have first is Her Power. Her Power is a women's empowerment project developed by 3 community advocates who saw an immediate need for resources that promote holistic well-being across NYCHA developments. Through the engagement of wellness practices, they aim to build community and promote healing led by female-identified NYCHA residents, moving women and families through individual and community healing, becoming empowered leaders and wellness advocates. Next slide, please. Community Action for Healthy Homes. Designed by community fellows and resident activist members of the Brownsville Neighborhood Empowerment Network, will leverage their deep knowledge and experience in the community to identify residents with housing-related health issues, conduct surveys of their units to identify unhealthy conditions and areas for immediate repair, and deploy rapid fixes to these issues. Partnerships with local health providers will flag and refer patients who may have housing-caused illnesses or issues, such as respiratory illnesses that are exacerbated by mold and vermin infestations. Next team, please. Technical assistance for organizers. The Technical Assistance for Organizers project aims to increase organizing and communications capacity for 3 public housing developments in Manhattan and the Bronx. During COVID-19, resident leaders have struggled to engage their residents, and Technical Assistance for Organizers plans to work with these 3 resident advisory boards to host online events, outreach, and community assessments to determine the tech needs of residents during these trying times. Next team, please. Rockaway on Beat. Rockaway on Beat fellows will leverage on-beat skating events to improve the mental and physical health of NYCHA residents while building positive community spaces for the different Rockaway NYCHA developments. They will offer programming that, utilizing the community building aspects of roller skating and outdoor summer events, will encourage skill building and connection through positive physical practices for youth and adults alike. Next team, please. From Blocks to Beats. From Blocks to Beats is a program that targets medium and high-risk young adults in a music mentoring program to be hosted at the Tompkins Community Center. Tompkins residents believe youth need positive role models and efficient programming based in self-expression, healing, and skills training to remain off the street. Tompkins houses youth report needing a safe space, vocational job training, mentorship, and a music program. Next slide, please. So those were the 5 teams that we have in terms of this first cohort moving forward. As with any program that you may be considering, there are constraints and considerations that are both assumed and also that are emergent in the process of running the program. Some of the constraints and considerations that we've experienced have not been solely around specific design needs, terminology, or concepts, but have also been significantly present around what is actually needed to support the fellows towards success when engaging with service design concepts and processes for the first time. Some of the most present constraints and or considerations that we've been engaging with during this iteration of the program have been around the following 4 areas: technical needs, translation of concepts, time, and group dynamics. Technical needs first. So technical needs can include computers, laptops, connectivity, whether or not the internet is strong or consistent while they're doing work, technical onboarding, whether or not there's a familiarity with tools that we've used as a design team that we're also having them onboarded onto within the program. So Google Docs, Google Slides, Slack, calendar invites, all of the different tools that we use every day as designers may not be the tools available or familiar to the fellows at hand, or there just may be different tool practices that make it a longer process to learn. Translation of concepts. What does it look like when you have to teach not just a new concept, but also need to be teaching and introducing the whole discourse around the concepts that includes things like language, definition of terms, possible usage in other contexts outside of the classroom, and the impacts of how fellows can connect to those concepts because of alternative uses. So what does it mean for us to be accessible in our language? Time, ensuring time for groups to work together, especially within the construct of COVID-19 and social distancing, the way that we have been seeing it. What does it look like for groups to be able to work together consistently and have that time, especially outside of other things that they're already doing in their lives, which may be jobs or other fellowships or other extracurricular activities or even family? Having enough time for groups to get to know one another and support each other's projects is also something that we are finding and considering. Group dynamics. Has this group worked together before? Is this a new group that hasn't worked together before? How can you ensure that work is equitably distributed across groups? And often that also is in consideration of tech needs or concept comprehension. Also good to have group identify a project lead as a point of contact and influence. So who are already the leaders that are emerging within the groups and how are we able to support them? All of these considerations have allowed us to not only see the limitations of our expertise on what community needs look like and how to identify them, they have also allowed us to witness the emergence of brilliance of community leaders as their own experts with their own expertise that not only drives the success of programming like this, but allows the impacts of that programming to be lasting success stories for those community leaders like our fellows and the larger community members alike. Next slide, please. Perfect.
Thank you, Kyla, for introducing the fellows and their projects. So now I'm going to turn it over to a couple of fellows who are here on this call. So today we have Marquis Jenkins, and his project is Technical Assistance for Organizers. And then we have Arabia Simeon, and their project is From Blocks to Beats. So Marquis, I'll have you kind of take over right now. We're going to stay on this slide, and I just hope you can introduce yourself and give us a little context here, how you got here and what your project is.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It is amazing to be with each and every one of you and have the opportunity to share my story with you. As I said, my name is Marquis Jenkins, and I'm a community organizer, and I've been organizing public housing residents for the past 15 years. I started off organizing at good old Lower East Side in Manhattan on the Lower East Side, organizing public housing residents, and then moved on to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where I organized public housing residents around criminal justice issues. And then I moved on to REACT, where I was the environmental justice director, organizing public housing residents around environmental justice issues and creating healthy homes. Design by community couldn't have come at a more critical time. Currently now, the New York City Housing Authority is facing devastating income drops. There is a deficit of roughly $40 billion that we are facing. And with new plans and new proposals coming from every direction, residents were finding it hard to understand these plans and communicate with one another. On top of that, we got hit with COVID-19, which meant that all of the tenant association presidents all across the city and NYCHA's 326 developments were struggling to communicate with residents, do assessments on what residents need, and make sure that residents understood the proposals that were being introduced that would change the full landscape of public housing. And so immediately, with all the relationships that I had, I realized that the residents needed a new communication structure. They needed training on Zoom. They needed training on how to do text messaging and use online software. And so I was excited to learn that Design by Community had launched its fellowship, because I was able to take this as an opportunity to build a program that would allow me to provide some technical assistance to tenant associations in 3 public housing developments. And so I'm excited to be going through this project and learning from my fellow teammates, and picking up ideas from them. And I just can't wait to see the final product of what I'm able to achieve in this space.
Awesome.
Thank you, Marquis. And we're gonna have a Q&A at the end of this. So we'll be able to ask questions of Marquis at a later time. Arabia, might you want to take over and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet everyone. Also, Marquis, that was so beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm Arabia. I'm an artist, designer, entrepreneur, and community organizer from Brooklyn, New York. I actually am a recent grad of Smith College, and I've got a degree in computer science and studio art, but my real passions are just pretty much art and technology, but also incorporating media and giving back to the community in whatever way I can. Currently, I am a Design by Community Fellow, as well as a Venture for America Fellow, and also a member of my neighborhood safety team in Tompkins projects. I first came across the From Blocks to Beats program actually right after graduation. I was introduced to our project lead, Kanesha, at the concert, the end of the program concert, and I actually had friends in the program. So I heard about it. Being a youth growing up in Tompkins, it was really exciting just to see a music program come out of my neighborhood. So that really was for me like the big passion. And I've always been involved in community. Growing up, my mom used to throw really big barbecues and do give back events where we gave school supplies and laptops and things, a lot of the time out of our own pockets. And I used to make the flyers and hand them out to people. And that's really where I grew a passion to from of like actually talking to people and getting to know about people's issues. And I think from a young age, I've been really aware of the circumstances that people in my neighborhood face. So when I heard about this fellowship, I was definitely eager to be on the team with Kanesha. And I was honored that she asked me to, bring my, I would say minimal right now, or beginner, let's say beginner, my beginner design experience to the project. I think that from Blocks to Beats. Oh wait, I forgot to talk about what For Blocks to Beats is actually. From Blocks to Beats is a music training program, right? But in the beginning, it was targeting at-risk youth coming out of Tompkins houses and really trying to prepare them and give them a sense of community and healing through this music program. And now through this fellowship, we're actually trying to shift into creating more sustainable employment for our youth throughout the program, as well as the end result through one, community and corporate partnerships, but also creating some sort of mentorship program. And these are also tools that we are gaining through this fellowship. But I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy to just learn from this program and to give back to my community. This is something that I'm really excited about. And I know that From Blocks to Beats is going to be great.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dope. Thank you, Arabia, for telling us about Blocks to Beats and your personal history. Love the idea of you designing flyers very young with your mom and like getting those events going. So now I'm going to shift it over to Sophanie, who's going to lead our fellows through a moderated panel discussion about design and how Marquis and Arabia have kind of interfaced with design up into this point. So Sophanie, go ahead and I will let you take over from this moment.
Okay. Thank you guys. So we're gonna have a little conversation for the next half hour with our two fellows, Marquis and Arabia. Just ask pointed questions, but it's also a conversation. So to start, I guess basics, what does design mean to you and how has it changed or expanded over the course of the fellowship thus far? Let's start with Marquis. Do you want to jump in?
Yes. In a nutshell, it means intentionality. It means the ability to step back and really examine and have a real plan moving forward, right? That's it in a nutshell for me.
Okay. Arabia?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a similar thing. I think it's a process and like a mindset. I'm really getting into the groove of trying to ask the why questions and thinking about how I can be like empathetic towards people's situations, or like bringing like an equity side of things, I guess, really thinking about like equity, accessibility, and things like that, and designing a process around that. And I think that's what design is.
Okay. And how has it changed or expanded over the course of the fellowship to both of you guys?
Yeah, I can go again. For me, I think just really understanding what equity and accessibility can look like as one, a designer, but also a community organizer, I think has been expanded tremendously throughout this fellowship, and actually having language to place in the conversations when I'm talking about this, or even just like thinking about how we ask certain questions, or how we I guess put together a design brief. That's something that I'm not used to, and that's something that has expanded my whole understanding of a design process.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And I'm sure, Arabia, you could relate to this, but as community organizers, we are constantly firefighting and searching, and right, there's always a problem somewhere around the corner that we need to go and addressed. And for me, what this program has done for me is it's given me a dedicated space and a dedicated group of people that I can pitch and focus ideas for, and just have that specific time to be able to do it. So on Fridays, when we have our class, that is the only thing I get to focus on, and I don't have to focus on the other fires that are out there. And in addition to that, right, it's also, again, just having the ability to step back and be proactive, and using the tools that we're getting through this program to be able to really think critically. One of the biggest takeaways in the different skills that we're developing in this program is how to do interviews and talk to people who have done it before. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so being intentional about identifying the people who are doing the work, the challenges that they face, really is about how do we take it to the next level and not how we are competing with someone.
Okay, thank you guys. I'll just jump into the next. I mean, basically, have you had any surprise? I just got surprised by my phone, but have you had any surprise aha moments about learning service design or about this fellowship?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like overall this whole thing has been not really a surprise, or I guess an aha moment. It's just been like, I feel like I just plugged in my light for the first time. Like it's like a spark, you know, like I feel like I am understanding everything. And I think that community design, like service design, is the type of design that I want to get into, just for the simple fact that like the way that this fellowship is looking at it, it really does center the people. And I think that that is really what design is meant to be, especially human-centered design in general. So I think it just has reaffirmed everything that I'm doing in my life and just the work that my team and I are doing in our community. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say, well, man, there was a bunch of aha moments. But I guess for me, the aha moment was the process itself of beginning to do design. As an organizer, when we're doing press release and media advisories and writing up social media tweets, it's all about going straight to the issue and defining the issue. Whereas through this model, it wasn't necessarily about the issue. It was about the people. It was about understanding who you're working with first, right? So that you are tailoring whatever services that you want to provide, not necessarily to address that issue, but to help those people.
Got you.
Actually add something to that.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think in terms of like speaking about people as well, one thing that it taught me was like just working on a team. Ashley actually mentioned this a little bit, I believe. Really figuring out what you're good at and what your teammates are good at and like what you can bring to the table has definitely been a surprise to me, because I feel like certain things that I didn't think I was good at, I have some skills in. We did this activity, the skill mapping activity, still one of my favorite things, one of the first things we did, but that was really helpful in just understanding how our team wanted to manage the project. And that's something we're still working on, but I think it does play a really big part in design, in the way that you design programs specifically for community, because if your team isn't solid, then your program isn't going to be solid, in my opinion.
Great. That's great. I guess that kind of flows into the next question of how do you see your community practicing design? So beyond the individual, what about the communities you're working in as a collective activity?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
How do you see your community practicing design?
So the other big reason I'm excited is because we're also at a critical place where public housing residents need to determine what the future of public housing is going to be. And so while the housing authority and elected officials are trying to shove a plan through us, I am now going to be adopting the tools that I've gained to be able to work with residents, to be able to think about and put together an actual design plan for the future of public housing, created by the residents of public housing. So it's huge, but I think the time is now. And again, this fellowship couldn't have came at a more critical point.
Gotcha.
Oh.
Go ahead, Arabia.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it's kind of the same thing about it coming at a critical point, especially with our team, because from Blocks to Beats is actually ran with our NSTAT team through Tompkins, and a lot of our process as NSTAT members is really like creating programming that not only is fun, but also like educational and provide safe spaces for the youth, the elders, and the residents of Tompkins, and other NYCHA communities. And I think that if taking the stuff that we learn in this fellowship, we can definitely apply it to the way that we run our NSTAT teams and from now on, in terms of developing more programs, as well as just like iterations, right? Like this is technically the second iteration of From Blocks to Beats, and we do have like future plans of maybe one day expanding it to all NYCHA developments, right? So those are another iterations that we'll be doing the same kind of work that you guys are teaching us.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys. Moving forward, like, how do you feel like you'll define design in the future?
And how we would define design in the future?
Yeah, so the past few questions I've been looking at, like your past experiences, your experiences in the fellowship right now, like what happens post-fellowship? How do you feel like you'll be defining design in the future after these current lived experiences?
I mean, I'm hoping, as cheesy as it sounds, that it becomes a way of life. I think that there are remnants of this in different places. You can look at participatory budgeting. There are a number of different areas where it's poking out, and I'm seeing more and more people calling for it. So for the future, I will be one of those people, right? At every chance that I get to make sure that we are designing in this way, I think should be the norm.
Amen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like at this point, design is like becoming more of a lifestyle and the way of thinking for me. I want to take these tools that I'm learning and just apply them to everything in life, and especially with like my personal like tech background. I believe in like using technology as a vehicle, and I feel like design is like the perfect marriage for technology, and just pushing programs forward and furthering like the way that we interact with our community, as well as like for me, like this again has just like reaffirmed me wanting to be a designer. So like I do want to actually do this as a job and stuff, and continue to look at it from an impact lens, because I think that that's what this fellowship is really about. Like, how can we make impact on our communities that isn't detrimental, and actually centering them. Yeah.
Perfect. So talking about that, so what is the future you want to help design? Do you have specific ideas, just or general? I'd love to hear more.
I want to see the residents actually own public housing. I want to see not only that we have this design plan that we work together with, but that we actualize the plan. And yes, right, there'll be iterations of this plan as we grow and adapt and learn more and become better. But at the core, right, is that the residents have full control. Because what we've seen is it's not just a noble thing to give them control over their life. It works. It works, right? And if you want to improve the lives of communities, regardless of its communities of color, it's whatever community it is, right? You cannot do anything for them without them. And again, right? I just think it not only see it as the norm, but I'm gonna do everything that I can to make sure that it becomes the norm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the same, like that same thing. For me, I wanna like, I'm all for like residents owning NYCHA and like being in charge of NYCHA. Like that's something that I dream of. Like I want to own my projects one day. I don't know. I will. Who knows? But anyways, I really do believe that like if you give people the tools like you guys are doing for us, like they will fill that gap. And just like with neighborhood safety, I think these same like concepts can be applied to like economic stability and sustainability coming out of NYCHA. More jobs that are not just labor focused, but also like career or creative exploration, or even like design focus, where people are actually their job is to make programs for NYCHA development. Things like that. I think this can easily be applied to politics, and the way that we look at like local and state governments, and just like interacting with that. Yeah, I think that for me, I want the future to be like equity centered and really giving people what they need and not what you think they need, but like having it, actually designed from like research and interviewing and centering the people that you are trying to serve.
Thank you. And so I guess kind of coming to an end, I want to learn more about you guys and your professional future. Specifically, how will design be a part of your professional future?
I'm using it for my life right now. Right now, I'm trying to find the next path. I've started a consulting organization. I'm trying to figure out how I can be most impactful with all of the skills that I've been able to develop over the years, and really just be prepared to take it to the next level. And so now I have the tools, right? Like I know that I need to talk to other consultants who have started their own, their own LLCs. I need to do the research. There's all of these things that I'm bringing in to how I am going to be a consultant that continues to provide services in preserving public housing and criminal justice, and making sure that there is a real safety plan for our communities, education and environment, and economic justice. Those are my core issues, and I've spent 15 years developing those skills. And so what I want to do is take it to the next level. And I didn't have a tool to help me sort of walk through that process, and now I do.
Okay. Thank you. Arabia, how will design be a part of your professional future?
Yeah. So for me, I'm actually in another fellowship called Venture for America, and I move in August to be like a project manager. But actually, a part of my job is to design the startups like internal project management like processes and things like that. So I definitely want to incorporate like design concepts, and thinking about how I can best, like look at the startup community and how I can best, design a practice that works for that community. I mean, for that company, in the more immediate. But I also run like a collective called Decipher, and we're an art, media, and fashion collective. And we do a lot of community engagement and community events where we do like mutual aid events, art shows, things like that. And I want to utilize like service design in that way, because a lot our events are free to our community, and they're actually always centering our Tompkins community, because that's where the founders are from, including myself. So I see that in my future, but I also see myself, being a designer long term, and just working on different projects that make an impact on low income Black and Brown communities specifically, and working with NYCHA just to create more opportunity.
I guess to wrap up this session, I would just say thank you so much for sharing with us and giving us an overview of experience in the program and where you're going to be taking what you've learned into the future. With that, I will transition over to Ashley.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophanie. Thank you so much, Arabia. Thank you so much, Marquis. Like, that was so moving and like so restorative in so many ways. I think not just for like people in the audience, but just like also our team to hear like all the lessons you've been kind of compiling. And I just have a big smile on my face. Y'all are too much. You're just so much love to both of you. And thank you so much for being part of this fellowship and applying for this fellowship. Like, we couldn't have done it without community leaders like yourselves. And I just love your enthusiasm and earnestness in this. And it's something that I think we all can learn from ourselves in our own practice. So shifting over back to sort of this like last couple points before we go into Q&A. And of course, I know that we're actually ahead of time, which is a first for our team. We're always sort of behind time. So this is a unique set of expectations. So, you know, we'll have Q&A time, ample Q&A time. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But, you know, just wanted to kind of not end things but kind of like make sure that we're getting sort of the top level overview of, you know, what we're coming to, what is our conclusion. So in case you haven't come to the conclusion yourself after hearing Arabia and Marquis, after hearing these projects, we wanted to make it super, super clear that old models ask that we design for folks, you know, and I think everybody in this room understands that we've at least moved on from this, at least most of us here, to realize that we really need to design with people we're serving. And this model is begging us the question and asks us that we want to push the model and push service design methodology even further in order to ask ourselves how we might center community leaders to design their own interventions, that we don't need to be the people holding everything, that actually we can just provide a process and support along that way. And in this way, we can move from diversity, equity, and inclusion to actual progress and ownership by community. And this is what we're really looking for. And so, you know, I just want to go back to the fact that, you know, we shifted very quick from, you know, our previous model to this like emergency response. You know, we shifted very quickly to this new program model, and we're learning so much right now about that model, about how service design does or does not sort of fit the framework of community design, how these two things interact. And so we really are looking now, as we've had this emergency response, and now we have 13 wonderful fellows and 5 different projects that are amazing. We really need to shift to understand how we sustain the success and we keep moving this model forward. And so how are we going to look past this pivot to one that sustains this work is what we've been asking ourselves, is how might we continue to build that policy and design arc towards community ownership? And first, I think part of that is we need to learn from and build on top of this first iteration to build the model over time. We can't get it right the first time. This is our first time doing this. And so, you know, we really are just piloting this. We were building in feedback mechanisms and doing our own landscape research to learn how to evolve this model. You know, Arabia and Marquis and Jamila in the audience have already given us some feedback. We do a reflection after we learn each phase of this work, and we've done our first reflection phase and have learned quite a bit. We're also looking to expand this model to decentralize our team entirely and insert city agencies who are looking to connect more closely with community leaders in ways that are not checkboxes or surveys. And by doing this, we can bring this framework with a service design lens to agency partners, thereby strengthening their connections to community and getting more and more fellows. by training agencies and community members, Design by Community can become a collaborative and community source model. And in this way, we can continue to build capacity and do the work at the same time. You know, I have this like dream of 100 Design by Community fellows working together on projects, right? Like, what would that look like? Amazing. And we also need to understand that this was a need prior to COVID. We pivoted because like we had to, but this was a need prior to our pivot, right? And will need to be continued to increase trust in community that has been broken for a very long time. And it should be centered in their own recovery and thereafter. And so we want to continue to get the word out about this program. We need to redraw and keep redrawing conclusions, and we need to keep iterating to improve the program continually. And we need to share this work. So us coming to talk to you today is part of that. We want to share this work because this is something that's probably happened elsewhere, right? But we haven't found it. And so we're just sharing. And so if you know of a model that's similar, if you have something, a resource you want to share, like, please send it our way. We are all learning here and we're trying to make it better. And so, you know, let's continue this conversation. Be a friend. Mari, if you can drop in the Airtable form. We have a form that you can fill out if you're interested in continuing to learn about Design by Community. You know, the form says on the top that we are deep in program mode right now, right? So there may not be opportunities to connect at this moment, but we are thinking about ways in which we can, you know, ask questions, get resources, maybe collaborate with other designers. Maybe you want to know more about the projects. So, you know, we haven't dreamt up those ways yet, but go ahead and be a friend now, and we'll reach out to you when we have a moment. And then I want just like all of us to sit and ask ourselves and ask yourself in the audience, how might I actually incorporate or leverage community voices into the work that I do? How can I decentralize myself as a designer and really give a process and let the community actually take hold of their work and have that ownership? And I want you to kind of come away and ask yourself that question of like, how could I shift ownership of my projects to the community? And how might I do that? I know we love our how might we questions as service designers. So just wanted to lay this one out there for you to kind of ruminate on, maybe do some ideation, maybe redraw some conclusions, maybe do some landscape research. I don't know, you're service designers, I think you'll figure it out. And then lastly, we're gonna go to Q&A. We're like super ahead of time. So we've got time, but I think the first thing that we want is a question and response from you all, which is to say, what's your aha moment you're taking away from this talk? And here's a link to our one-pager, and you can know a little bit more about our program and different things that we have done already. But for right now, I'm gonna mute myself and I'm gonna ask a couple people, you know, I don't know if it needs to be all 49 of you, but you know, if you've had a moment, if you had an aha moment, or if something came out or rang true for you, could you let us know what those are? And I will go ahead and mute myself now and would love to have people take themselves off mute and let us know what your aha moment is from this talk.
I can share. So my name is Lena, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm actually doing my master's in strategic design right now. And a big aha moment for me was actually when I think, Arabia, you were just describing what design means to you. And honestly, even after a year into my master's program, like we still struggle with like, how do we explain this to people? And when you said like, oh, it's a way of, I took notes, one sec, I wanna make sure I got it right. It's a process and a mindset. So what asking the right questions and thinking about equity and accessibility, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I got it. Design is a process and a mindset. And it's a way of living, which you added afterwards as well. So that was my big aha.
That's really cool.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Lena, for sharing. Yeah, you can quote Arabiana, just make sure you tag her. No, just kidding. Anyone else?
Well, this is Jamila Days here. I want to share that I've been having a lot of aha moments because before I connected with the design team, I didn't really think that could contribute to the project like this because I didn't have the knowledge and the skills. But working step by step with the design team, it's like I need to stop being so negative on myself. I'm actually amazed at the accomplishment. And listening to Marquis and I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. But listening to my fellow designers and how Marquis was saying stuff, how he had to get in his community with the pandemic and teaching them about Zoom and all that. And I realized I learned so much that before, when I was trying to get stuff like this to learn how to get in my community, it was always roadblocks or somebody just not really showing me the steps on how to interview, how to talk. So yeah, I'm having a lot of aha moments with this, making real proud of myself.
Yeah, Jamila, time to pat yourself on the back. Jamila is another one of our designers, part of the project, and she's part of Her Power. So she's really interested in actually the same kind of area that Arabia is working in Bed-Stuy houses, around wellness and how to access women to move that wellness up the chain in their family, to the men, to the grandparents, to the elders, to their children. So thank you, Jamila. Any other aha moments from the audience?
Hey, I'm Kristen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm so inspired right now. I can't even pick one. I'm trying to pick one. Just the way that you've like activated like these communities and like really truly seen them is something that's like amazing. And I'm just really excited to see that whole chain of people thinking about people and how we can all like do this together better. Just so this is amazing. Congratulations to all you fellows.
Thank you. Yeah, unless anybody else has an aha moment, I'll keep a pregnant pause for about 10 seconds. Let's say 5 to 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, so Q&A is officially open. You don't have to answer any more questions, but you can ask us questions. We're ahead of schedule, so we've got ample time. So I'm gonna take us off the screen share. We can just all look at each other and see if there are any questions from the audience we can answer from y'all. Don't be shy.
Can I bring something up from the chat? I'm not sure who mentioned it, but there was a comment around ownership or lack thereof ownership and how that translates.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I actually added you because I was like, Marquis probably has something to say about this. So what does he have to say about this?
Let me go. Can you just bring the comment back up? I don't want to miss. Was there someone particular who?
It was Jan. I believe that was their name.
Yeah, I remember this too. I'm trying to find it to repost. Oh.
I mean, I guess while we find it, that comment stood out to me because it's a very, it's something I've heard a lot over the years. And ownership is a real key, I think, to people feeling like they have to protect it with everything that they have. Public housing residents have been hit with I mean, you can name any injustice that we fight here in New York City and across the globe. And I promise you that I will find at least one public housing resident who was impacted by this. And so when you think about why don't public housing residents do this, why don't public housing residents do that, it's because we did. We're fighting 101 different battles. And at the end of the day, the Housing Authority still tells us we have no rights. They just introduced a major plan to shift every single public housing development in New York City to Section 8. That's 176,000 families who are going to be impacted. And was there any type of design approach here? Absolutely not. So constantly being told that you have no say, constantly fighting all of these other issues, we're beat. We're beat. Public housing is in the state that it's in now, not because of the inactivity of public housing residents, but because of the greed of the real estate industry.
Yeah, Marquis, I echo kind of what you said about, like, I've not seen more actually involved folks than those that are part of communities that they want to uplift, and that most of the time that it really is the privilege of time and resources that these folks are missing, right? It's the privilege of time, it's the privilege of resources, it's the privilege of connectivity. And it's not about whether or not they want better housing or better for the community, because I will say that working in community, you will never find someone who wants better for their community than their community. You know, like, none of us in this room, right? I don't belong to NYCHA. I've never lived in NYCHA housing, but Marquis, I know if I go to Marquis or I go to Jamila or go to Arabia, I bet you they've got some answers or thoughts about that. So just want to, make sure that we understand that people, what Marquis is saying is people are tired because they've been fighting battles on 200 fronts with people who have more and more resources and connections than they could ever have. I think in the chat, you said, could you please share about what the design or service design training was like for the fellows and how those skill buildings were supported throughout the year? Yeah, I'm gonna mess up your first name, so I'll say Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Park, that we are in this process right now. We are learning and designing this curriculum right now. And it changes based on what happens on our Friday sessions. Like, I think Arabia, Marquis, and Jamila in the audience today knows that last week we had a moment where we said, hey, we had this plan to go about building some interview guides with you today. We're not there yet. We're going to slow down for a moment and make sure that you all have good project briefs, that you all have good stakeholder lists, that you all have a good secondary research. And we kind of explained that by saying, this is iteration. This is literally live iteration right now. We looked at the documents. We saw that we were kind of in a place where we needed to kind of pause and move at the speed of their trust and speed of their understanding. And then we changed what we were doing. And this is taking a lot of time. And like, yes, I think like Kyla, Mari, Sophie, and I are very busy because we have to be responsive to the fellows' needs, but that's because this is our first iteration. And so we have to make sure that we're moving with our fellows. And if we go beyond where our fellows are, then we've lost them. And so we have to figure out how we're pushing that. And then also making sure to reserve trust and time for our fellows. So we mainly kind of pull from our civic service design tools and tactics framework, which you may have seen earlier. But basically, this is a framework that our civic service design team uses. Mari, maybe you can drop in the chat the tools and tactics link.
Yeah, I can. You can also find it in the doc, the bit.ly doc.
Ooh, it's in the doc.
Not directly, but hold on, I can try to find it directly.
So yeah, we sort of, we build from our own fundamentals that we've kind of used over the past couple of years while we teach government agencies how to do the service design process. And now we're adapting that framework to the community and realizing the points at which it works and the points at which it doesn't, and how we kind of reframe things and how we like pause in some moments in order to really think about with intention how to bring a community into this framework. And how to change that framework over time. But I'll let,
I just wanted to add one more thing. You know, for the service design team, our practice has been very focused on supporting city agency colleagues, right? So a lot of our language, a lot of the way the words that we use, the way that we frame service design has been from a civic design lens, right? So we bring up government examples, you know, in our case studies, so it's all in that form. So the thing is here, we've really had to look at our framework and say, well, we can't be talking about, work with, ACS, like Administration for Children's Services or something like that. That's really, it's quite out of context, right? When you're talking, when you're in this program. So we've really had to reframe a lot of things, but also to Kyla's point earlier in the presentation about concepts and things like that, it's never I think the thing is, we always realize like plain languaging design jargon is super important, because it can be a barrier to entry if you're just like assuming everybody knows like what iterative is, or like journey mapping and all that kind of stuff, and we really have to like open, and open up and like really talk more open, like freely and clearly about like what design is, and make that part is an accessibility piece as well. So that's something that we're learning right now.
Yeah. Kyla, you're doing some like community management over here, and I didn't realize what's going on.
That's why they're amazing, Kyla.
We have Marina, who has had their emoji hand up, I believe, for a question. And then we have Beth and Natalie following in the chat with questions.
Oh my gosh, love it. Marina.
Hi, everyone. This has been so amazing. I've been following the work of this studio for a while. Back when Ariel was leading it, and kind of I'm loving seeing this iteration of it, and I'm doing similar work in Los Angeles actually, so just I have the hugest smile on my face from watching this. One thing I'm curious about your perspective, and that's, I think it's kind of a broader conversation in design, more of a problem in the private sector for sure rather than public facing projects, but how do you, when you look at who's creating the thing, the end products and services, how do you handle the idea of ownership? Is it the entity that's led the work? What responsibility do you feel we have to the community to share in that ownership, whether there's a fiscal gain or whatever it ends up looking like? Has that come up, and what does it look like in your ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I'm going to take a stab at it. Kyla, you jump in. Mari, you jump in as needed. We've been thinking about this actually. So we've had to like build very quickly on a very small team. And so I think this week we've really come kind of like face to face with this idea of like, how do we offboard? Like, of course, we're thinking about the future. August 31st is sort of the end of this fellowship, but knowing that there will likely be a need afterwards. These are their projects. We're not going to own them at the end. I think at the end, we, will provide some support as needed. If they want to come in and talk to us, or, get us to look over a project brief, like we're going to be family from here on out, in my opinion. Like I'm here to support them after this. And so they're going to own their projects. We may or may not have the level of time that we have now to support their projects, but we will always be here to support them. And so I think right now we're kind of trying to understand at this moment, like, do we need to build in a business practice as well, where we're linking up with someone who teaches how to make an LLC, how to make a business principal, how to bookkeep, things of this nature. These are things that are cropping up in our minds right now, because we're seeing the progressive need of like, once we kind of, take our kind of direct process away, how can we make sure that these projects are successful and can continue to fundraise, right? Like we've given them a funding nest to kind of grow their projects from, but that's not enough to sustain a project over time. It's just really the first time to iterate first and kind of get it off the ground. And so like, how do we make sure that our fellows can sustain that success, that project afterwards? And it's going to have to be their own ownership. Yeah. Thoughts on that, Kyla, Mari?
I think one thing to add to that is just also, what does it look like to, within a cohort, create community, so that the cohort itself is able to both utilize the resources that it has within its particular like community, or because it's specifically like NYCHA housing, like their specific like NYCHA community, but also like expanding out, right? Like there's so much opportunity in terms of what it looks like for, you know, Marquis and Arabia and Jamila and all of the rest of the fellows to just like really be in community with each other and continue to build possible programming that will help support other programming that they're already building and moving forward. And so I think that in addition to what it looks like for a design team, you know, to step up and be like, we are here for support. I think it's also the larger, how are we giving and empowering like fellows to be able to continue this process with themselves as experts, and empowering other experts within their community so that it continues to grow and not have to be specific to a design team or anything like that.
Arabia's got her hand raised.
Yeah, I forgot how to do the little emoji thing, and I but anyways, I'm not a part of the design team. I'm a fellow, but I do actually have something to add to this. I think you also mentioned like just I don't remember the exact wording you said, but I'm thinking something more about like money and funding. And I think in terms, one thing that I've been learning throughout this process is like about transparency. And like one thing that the fellowship does really well on social media is just like highlighting our projects and things like that, and like actually like making it clear that it's our ownership of the projects. But I think also one thing that could just make it better is like talking about funding. A lot of mutual aid organizations have been doing this and like publishing like where the money is going. Because when you're working with community, a lot of the time you can say, okay, we got this grant. Most people for instance, in my community don't even know what a grant is. They don't know the difference between a grant, a loan, or what like a fellowship or any of those things are. So like just being transparent in where the money is going and how the money is being allocated and things like that, I think is always like a really good practice when you're working with communities like public housing, NYCHA, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Arabia, for adding on. We'll move on to the next question, which is Beth. I'm curious, are fellows using co-design workshops in their service design journeys? We've done a little bit of thinking about this. Maybe Mari, you want to answer that?
I mean, I think part of it is we're at a phase right now where co-design is going to happen in a month or two or whatever. But I think the point I want to make is, you know, that I think a lot of us have been reflecting on and realizing is like, yes, they will be doing co-design work in their service design journeys. But I also want to like kind of make this point too. Before even entering this fellowship, these fellows, these leaders have been co-designing with their communities. We maybe not naming it service design or anything like that. And I don't want even to claim that it's called, you know, that it should be called that. It's just something we're familiar with. But the point I'm trying to make is they know how to do co-design probably better than a lot of us practitioners. And we have a lot to learn from the fellows about what co-design can really look like and feel like. What kind of, you know, transactions, what kind of conversations need to be had in these co-design spaces. So I just kind of wanted to make that point. So, but Kyla, Ashley, anybody, if you want to add on to that.
I mean, that's my question. So I just wanted to kind of clarify and add on to that. So I can totally appreciate that. And I see exactly what you're talking about just by the way that the fellows have presented themselves and the way they use the service design language. They seem to have a great handle on it. Plus their experiences before even, you know, I guess becoming a fellow. The reason why I was asking that question was to just better understand being naive and not really understanding the space. How then do they take that and have any influence? Like how, you know, if they have all this information, they know about the community, they have a lot of passion about what they're doing, how then do they take and translate that into something that actually ends up having action? Because I think Marquis was saying, you know, they work so hard, they've been working for many years to try to do this, but it seems to me like one of the missing elements is the influence. So just curious about that. there's any, I'm not sure if there's any answers to that right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think though, I talked a lot about this being a critical time for the program because I have a group, right, called the Residents to Preserve Public Housing. And they're tenant association presidents from all across the city who come together and we fight. The challenge, we have been successful, right? Like if you look at the full context of public housing all across the country, we have stood strong. We have seen hundreds of thousands, we have lost hundreds of thousands of public housing all across the country, and we're still here because of the strength of our fight. What has been the biggest challenge is this design piece, right? It's easy. I'm sure you guys can relate. Arabia, being an organizer, we're pretty good. We're kick-ass at saying we don't want that, we don't want that, we don't want that. But it requires a lot more resources, thinking, and planning for us to come up with what it is that what we want. And what we know, right, is that the tenant associations don't even get a lawyer to fight against any plan that is coming through, let alone a design person who can come. You know, all of these different services and tools that the Housing Authority has at their disposal, residents don't have. And so that's the big challenge that we face, is the design piece, and having the expertise and skills to make sure that what we want has the backing of facts and data to support it.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that too. I think it's also just like giving us the resources to know how to apply these things in the future. Even just like, for instance, looking at how this fellowship came together through a partnership is direct representation, and how we can form partnerships with our programs, and just like applying those concepts in very real time with working with our community. Like a really big part of the fellowship is interviewing and backing our design questions with research. And I think From Blocks to Beats is a younger program, so like it was successful because like those kids that were in our programs didn't end up dead or in jail that summer. They ended up recording demos and you know, actually being productive and getting stipends and actual mentorship in a way that they would have never gotten throughout their probably in their life. Like there are a lot of people that are my age. I'm turning 24, right? There are people who are my age who literally just don't have any access to resources. And I think what's great about this fellowship is not only that we're learning about the concepts, but how to apply it to our community and through our program, so that our program can really, I guess, like I went into like asking the why questions, but really just determining like what the needs are. And like, I know, I think people say like pain points, right? Like what are the actual, like, this is the problem, but like finding that out and not in a way of them actually just telling us. Cause I think the community can just, you know, not complain or anything, but like everyone knows what they don't like. It's like getting to those points, like Marquis said, of understanding, okay, this is what we want. And we are going to create a strategic plan to get those things, back it with data, apply it, you know, all that.
Yes, Arabia. Yes.
Can I add, like I had said in the comments, being with the design team also helped me with my profession and to show how I can incorporate what I do professionally with her power. Like I said before, I'm an addiction counselor. I've been in the field for a while, and I also have experience with it. And becoming a part of the design team made me change my whole profession. Now I'm a full-time advocate. And I realized how I can incorporate the stuff I learned now versus being quiet in meetings, instead of sharing my experience versus listening to people say things about addiction that they have no idea what they're talking about. So the tools not only help with the project we're doing now, but it's also going to incorporate stuff in the future that I plan on doing and taking it to, like Marquis is saying, to the community that don't otherwise didn't know. Sometimes it's more out of fear versus you getting head on in your face, one-on-one versus how it was done before. So yeah, this is helping. It's slow in the process, and it's been a long time for most of us. But the pandemic has opened a lot of people's eyes on change now. They want to get better. They want their communities to get better, and the youth are really showing a lot of us that with the time and the effort they putting into marching, organizing. I've been around for a long time in my community, and I've never seen that like this. It seemed like a movement come every 50 years. A movement. This is a movement. It's not just going to go away, with the change in politics.
Yes, Jamila. Yes, yes, yes. If you
I think Ashley froze. I can jump in there. Or Kyla, you want to take it?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Oh no, am I frozen?
Oh,
now you're unfrozen.
You're not.
Oh, okay, I'm back. Okay. I was going to go on to Natalie's question, which was, as someone who works a 9-to-5 as an in-house service designer for a financial institution, very sorry, what are the most helpful ways that I can support the program shared today? Volunteering my time, company sponsorship. We will take your money. If you want a private partnership, we're going to take your money. So, add us, email us.
That goes for us fellows
We're
too.
looking.
Yeah, the fellows. Give it to the fellows.
I guess.
I think I wanted to add, Natalie, that I don't think we talked about this explicitly earlier on, but this cohort and a second cohort are funded by CITI, Community Development Corporation, who has been supporting the service design team since its inception for many a year now, and so we've built a lot of trust with them to let us do this program, because usually this money would not go directly into community. It would go into our mayor's fund, and then there would be a whole bunch of other bureaucratic paperwork, and this cohort would have never have happened had it been like that. But they gave us an opportunity to do this pivot and said, we'll hold this, you tell us where it should go. And we've said, take root justice. And then there we'll take it. we'll take whatever you want to give. So
yeah, and I think, like Mari, you bring up a good point, which is like, we had the trust and privilege of a financial donor who would back us up, and again, we're in those spaces to get that trust and privilege, right? And so how can you, as designers in this room who might be at financial institutions or other big institutions, have the same approach by using your privilege to put money to programs like this? I think we're thinking about how do we sustain this program over time, and how do we make sure that we get funding in year after year after year. And so, it may end up being a private public partnership of some sort. I think, this is the first iteration where we've got two iterations in the bag right now, and we're trying to figure out how to do that best right now. And then opening up our model to figure out how we fund it for the future and continue growing it is really something that is in the back of our minds right now, but is something that is unfortunately not to the forefront because we're running the program right now. But it's something that we're definitely thinking of. That's why we have this contact us, be a friend of Design by Community, because we may not have an opportunity for you right at this moment because we're deep in it, but when we get our heads out of the sand, when we kind of get a moment to breathe, we'll definitely have an ask that'll come up. Next question, Christian. You're on mute, Christian. Your little signal's says you're not on mute, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. My Zoom always does this to me. My name's Christian. My pronouns are she, her. I am a service designer in Maricopa County in Arizona. And Mari kind of already touched on this, but I have been trying to make the argument to shift from working on department pain points to community needs. And I was curious how you made that argument and how you got that buy-in from leadership.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So this is work in progress constantly, and so Service Design Studio, kind of going back to our presentation around building capacity and doing the work. We spent a lot of time just evangelizing, like, what is service design? How do you use it in its very basic form? And how can it be applicable in your agency project work? Workshops, trainings. We have office hours every week to socialize what service design is. We promote it. We use design to, tweet it out to all the different agencies. So we did a ton of work to and we still do a ton of work to let people know, like, what this thing is and how you can use it in plain language, So that is one big way we got buy-in. The other thing is we sit in the mayor's office, so we're pretty high up, so it's easier to influence the deputy mayors and all these commissioners and even the mayor and first lady and stuff like that too. So there's some proximity, that we have to that kind of power, I guess I would say. But I would also say that, we've really held strong to our principles with design, and have, jumped in, or in earlier times we do, whatever we needed to do to just get on the map. And now, because I actually, it's oddly, because of this pandemic, more and more folks in the city were like, oh my gosh, this pandemic is happening. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to respond, but we know we need to go out into these communities and support them. So how do we do that? And it's like, well, maybe you should go talk to them. But then the questions would come back from all these different agencies and offices of how, and is it a survey? Is it can I just talk to like 2 people real quick that I know? And it's like, no. If you genuinely want to know and understand what the community is like, come to the service design studio and we'll talk to you about what it's like, how to actually connect with communities in genuine ways and ways that do not harm them as well. And so those who were invested and wanted to do that started to come to us and ask us for best practices. And the word started to really spread this past year, what our expertise was in. And because we were in such high demand, we were able to also just say no. If someone was like, could you just like do a couple of interviews so we could like make this policy change tomorrow? And it's like, no, you don't really care about the community, and so we're not going to work with you. So this big saying no thing has started to emerge in the last couple months, I would say. But that's all this being said, I'm fast forwarding like all the work we've done. The service design studio was started in 2017, like officially, but was still in the works like in the years prior when Ariel Kennan was here too. So it's 2021 now. It took like 6 years to get to where we are at this point, and I think that's the kind of timeline we're looking at here for influencing other municipalities. But hopefully the influence of this studio, the influences of other amazing studios like Philly's team, or Lab at OPM, or just a bunch of other folks like doing this work across the U.S. and abroad will hopefully be a way for us to like drive that change much more quickly. So I would definitely leverage what other municipalities have been doing, because that's what we did. We were just like, this place, they're all rocking it right here. So if you let us do that, we could do it too, but better, because you always want to have NYC be #1, then let's make that happen. And so that's the kind of like work that we put into getting to where we are at this moment. But we still have a ton of work to do. Yes. It's just the beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg for service design in government. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is our first like stab at problem solving, and once we were given the space, time, and privilege to actually pivot money on ourselves as a team, this is what we chose to do. And that meant we had like-minded people who wanted to see it look this way as well, and not a capital D design, but a lowercase, more community-centered D design. Yeah. Next question was for Ava. Through the design process, were there NYC agencies who you worked with outside of the design studio? If so, how did that go? Ava, can you come off mute and clarify your question a little bit? Do you mean outside of design by community and the service design studio at large? Or can you clarify just a little bit if you're still around?
Hi. I guess something like when teams were working with like NYCHA, did they actually like go and talk to individuals who worked at NYCHA, or HUD or any other form of service, like health and human services, if it was associated with like a drug program? Was there, did you guys chat with these organizations?
Yeah, and I think that that comes sort of after we get a community pulse. So right now we've really thought about this as like, we're first going to talk to what we are calling community voice. And again, this is how design language is shifting for the community design process. And we think about community voice as the people who are in their community that are looking for these services or may benefit from these services. So we're really centering those voices in our next step right now. And so Ava, we haven't gotten to the point where we've started incorporating what we're calling access holders. Those are the people who have these kind of pathways or may be able to kind of connect their programs to different pathways or access points of access. And so once that point comes, I think we have to spend some time with the fellows to understand like their neighborhood access points, right? So every NYCHA community has a key holder to a community center or, you know, a resident advisor or a maintenance team that may be influential about how services are rendered. But then how do you go up that ladder to maybe someone who oversees all the maintenance workers? And do we provide that space or do we provide that connection in some way? And I think that's something that we have to figure out right like soon. That's like that's a soon question, but not a now question for us. But yes, I think that we have to be very conscientious about how we ask our NYCHA, you know, the people who are working at NYCHA, how to support these programs, because I think there are a lot of different tensions that we may not be aware of before we could do that connection that we just need to assess and make sure that, you know, everyone can benefit from talking to one another.
Plus, once they know that I'm involved, they're like, oh no. I've been giving them a lot of trouble, so.
Yeah, they're gonna be like, no, Marquis, that guy, no way. We're not opening up the doors. And so like, that's a two-way street. And that's gonna be the really big challenge once we get to that point of like, how do we balance the fact that we're government, we're working with community, and we have to somehow get them to influence a government agency that we have no ownership over. And so it's just us in an office trying to figure that out right now of like, how do we balance those relationships and make sure that we stay in a place of privilege so that we can continue to do this work and not harm our relationships with other agencies so that we can continue to do this work, and then figure out how we might be able to connect fellows in a way that doesn't harm our relationship with NYCHA and may end a program like this, right? So it's like, long story short, don't know right now. But I think that's something that we have to kind of like individually assess with our projects. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mari, don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
We're very intentional about not having too many cooks in the kitchen, I guess to say. NYCHA is aware, their community engagement team, they are very aware of this program, but we made it very clear that we want to focus on this program, and then can we invite you when the times are right to have these conversations with us, to have these conversations with the fellows. We need to get to know them first, and we need to build trust. And so they understand that. And you know, but separately, outside of these things, we are talking to different agencies about this model in general, not like, oh, you know, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, like, do this, you know, it's what agencies are very interested right now is this equity piece, right? Of like, how can they provide more equitable services and programs and supports to the community? And so that's the hook we're kind of leaning on, like dealing with right now, of like, let's talk about like an equity centered model that we're doing right now. And then they get attracted to like, ooh, tell me more about how you're doing that, you know? And so then that's how we start to like talk more about this fellowship. And it's like, yeah, you could bend this in so many ways and make it be appropriate for your topic issues or whatever. But, you know, for now, we're going to go back to our corner and do this work, and like that it's here for you, and we'll keep sharing with you. So we're just more building community right now and letting people know lightly, like, and storytelling a lot right now to let people know what we're doing. And then I think we'll invite people to come a bit closer to the work when we start to feel like we can talk about it more robustly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the big name of the game right now is earning and building trust. And I don't think that bringing in agencies at this moment in time is the right time. And so, yeah, we need to kind of iron that out for ourselves. But yeah, I think it all just around what Mari said was that we have to intentionally bring in our agencies. And I think for right now, just as we've done the background work with agencies for the past 4 years, like instead of coming at them with a hard ask about these things right now, we really need to be soft about it so that, you know, in a couple of years, when this model kind of builds and we ask them to take this on or ask them if they want to be a part of this, that they've known what this program is, who our fellows are, what the outcomes have been, what the goals have been. And so that way we can get them more to a point of partnership rather than, you know, this kind of power dynamic that would happen right now if we brought them in.
Gotcha. I think something you guys taught us, like, I feel like everything you're saying is like, you're kind of in the process of just like validating the need for this kind of design work and the need for a shift and stuff.
Arabia, exactly. We are doing our own service design process on this entire program right now. Okay, is it Dare?
Dare, actually, like Truth
Dare.
or. And this, my question was sort of well-timed and poorly timed because your conversation just previously really addresses some of it. But I guess I wonder if you could, I'm really just so in awe of the work that the fellows are doing. It's really such amazing programs and so fantastic to hear from you both, Marquis and Arabia. And then also in terms of the framing of this program that Mari and Ashley and Sophie that you laid out, really the goals for the service design studio overall are about shifting power in terms of how government programs happen. And I think I would really just love to hear a little bit about that kind of longer term vision for, you know, if previously the service design studio was working with city agencies to transform how those agencies operate and how they do service delivery, and now is supporting community initiatives that are external to city government and will have challenges in terms of sustainability in the long run. What's the sort of marriage of those two models? You guys were speaking to that a little bit just now, but I'd love to hear more about the vision for how those two things can be brought together for this really powerful sort of shifting of power, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think right now it's really just about kind of like telling them and showing them and dangling something really equity focused in front of them when it's like this key buzzword right now of going, oh, this is equity. Don't you see this is equity? And then that gets their attention. I think in the future, and this is something actually we have a workshop set for Thursday to talk about, you know, what's the future? Like, how are we thinking about this? How does this grow in the next iteration? So we don't have those answers now because we haven't had it community informed. But, you know, the thought is that, you know, I think I said in my presentation, like, we want this to live inside agencies as well, that they have their own sort of bucket of money that is only for community driven work, you know, and that they can, I think it has something, and again, this is like top of brain, what I've been percolating on. It has not been validated. I don't know anything. So this is just what I'm thinking right now. But I think it has something to do with piloting interventions and what are sustainable interventions over time. And so how can we use design by community and the fellows projects as pilots to larger interventions that agencies can then on a systemic level change, right? And how do we validate those pilots over time? And so that's kind of like some thinking that I've had, but that is very loose. We do not know. I think we also have to ask our fellows about that over time, like once we get to a better place. But
yeah, I mean, that actually made me piggyback, because I wonder if like the projects that you all ultimately selected, because you got a few, you know, a good chunk of projects, if that was a factor in the projects that you selected. Because to the question, my project particularly doesn't rely on a relationship with the housing authority. And I don't know to what extent that is across the board with all of the fellows, but I think that's part of the reason that it works. We're not seeking permission. In fact, we're trying to move them in a specific direction.
Yeah, so Marquis has given me something to think about too right now. Like, are we even asking agencies for permission? And I think that's something that you're seeing a learning happening right now.
Yeah, oh
no, go ahead, Arabia, go for it.
I was gonna say I definitely agree, like, not to push you guys a little bit, but like I definitely don't think that there needs to be a permission, because people have been asking NYCHA and these agencies for permission for years now, and still nothing has changed. Actually, it's gotten worse in a lot of cases. So I think doing things where the community has a say and actually like the projects and the programs that are coming out of it. Like we can work with NYCHA youth because we are NYCHA residents, right? So working with, for instance, for Blocks to Beats, working and recruiting participants for the program could be as easy as just knocking on our neighbors' doors because we live in these in the neighborhood with them. So I think like, I don't know. I think permission is like so 2020, like we're in 2020.
Anytime you ask, you get the permission to say no.
Exactly. Like, and that's all we've been getting. So just do it. Just move forward.
What is that saying? Like, it's better to do and ask for forgiveness than
ask for forgiveness, not permission. I have used it. There are drawbacks to it though, so don't use it everywhere.
Use sparingly.
Yeah, it's to be used sparingly, especially when you're kind of where we are in the mayor's office. We have to, because otherwise they're going to fire us all. No, they won't fire us all, but you know, we might not get money.
They'll
Who
be
knows?
on top of this. But I also wanted to add, it's not just like the projects and where do they live and like all that kind of stuff. It's also just like the demonstration of this whole thing of being with people in community and, stepping back as gatekeepers, because we recognize, as much as I don't think I am at the end of the day, I work in government. I work for one of the biggest government, city governments, and that by default means that I'm part of a gatekeeping industry, and so I recognize that and I acknowledge that. And so how do we bring the elements of empathy into the table? How do we bring real voices, thoroughly to the table? These other underlying and pieces that are happening, the culture change that we're doing, the type of partnership we're trying to, and relationship we're trying to have here in this fellowship program amongst all of us, these we want to demonstrate as in and of itself. And if we can do those things and start to have people think, maybe it's not a fellowship program that they want to start too or whatever, but maybe it's just a different way, a better and correct, right way, to be with community. Maybe that's what we need to, that's part of it, So if I can see someone at another agency thinking about the community genuinely in a tiny project and saying, we need to talk to them and we need to do it like this, and and if the fellowship helped influence that, cool, that's a win for us too. So I think there's a lot of strategies going on here for our team.
Yeah, we've got a lot of landscape research and learning to do as a team that we haven't been able to do at this point in time, but I think is something that we're greatly looking forward to doing once, the curriculum of the fellowship ends, to take stock of everything that we learned and say, like, how do we apply this in our next iteration? And what does it actually look like to move this forward intentionally, not just to bring agencies in for the sake of bringing agencies in, but to like center community and the practice and the framework more. And if that means taking, and Mari, who knows, maybe if that takes a couple more iterations of in-house work, then maybe that's it. But we've yet to kind of uncover that at the moment. I think something that Mari, you said, is about being a gatekeeper. Like, that's what we're all interrogating right now. Kyla, Sophie, myself, Mari, we're constantly thinking, how am I gatekeeping information? How am I gatekeeping from fellows? How do I open up those gates? And being very well aware of the fact that, hey, I've got a lot of privilege because never in my life have I been given this funding to then say, do what you want with it. I mean, what is that? I came from working in community and did actual community work for a very long time where there was no budget to give. We didn't have a budget. We had to know where every dollar was. You better believe I reported everything every month, and everything was nickel and dime. And that was direct service, right? That was community work that I was doing. And this is the first time in my life I've seen, because I'm in a privileged space now, that says that here's money, do something with it. And what can be done with it? And how does that shift also for our fellows if we say, here's money for your project, do something with it, right? And so we're just extending that privilege further and further into community that we've earned, or been, not really earned, but been given, right? By the fact that we've been in this space for a long time. But I think we're at 8. Oh my God, we made it to 8.
Thank you all so much for joining. I want to say, can we do like air claps, or we can do the clapping from afar? Thank you so much for joining us this evening to share. Thank you everyone for listening and your engaging questions. Wonderful. We'll share the resources with the community afterward, as well with the service design community. Anything else you want to close with?
Anyone? Kyla, Mari, Marquis, Arabia.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for hearing our story. It is my hope, right, that we've met the goal of this discussion, which is that to get you guys to do more of this type of work all across the country, and to expand and continue to do more and more iterations so that it does in fact become the norm. And then last shout out to Jamila for holding us down and coming and giving some love.
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well. This has just been a great opportunity, and kind of just piggybacking off what Ashley said. Like I feel privileged just to be in these kind of spaces, like, you know, especially because I am still in the projects, and I, you know, will be in the projects, and I love the projects. Nothing wrong with projects. Anyways, but like just being, I feel more privileged than my peers, you know, just from the opportunities that I've had so far. So like, I just want to say thank you for listening to us. And like Marquis said, I hope we have inspired you to like go and do this work. And yeah, and ask why questions to the people that you are serving.
I think that's a good place to end with Marquis and Arabia, to be honest. There's nothing more that we can add. All right, thank you for coming to the talk. Thank you everyone for being part of it. Jamila, thank you so much for repping the cohort and coming in for the audience. Much love to you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
And Tina, thank you, Tina, for coming. And Kim, Old NYCHA, what's up? Hi. Laura, Carrie, Old NYCHA, what's up? Miss you too. Shout out to everyone. Love you.
Bye, y'all. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.